He tried to embarrass her on live TV by mocking her cross necklace. But what Jasmine Crockett said next stopped the room cold and sparked a national conversation no one saw coming. The studio lights felt harsher than usual. Maybe it was the topic, or maybe it was just one of those mornings where tension lingered before a word was even spoken. The air conditioning hummed above the set of Real Point Weekly, a conservative cable show shot in Dallas, Texas, known for hard takes, sharper jabs, and the occasional viral moment. Clayton Ward, the host, sat stiff in his chair. Starched suit, no smile, and a tone that always felt like a challenge. He glanced at his notes, then flicked his eyes up at Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, seated across from him under the hot lighting. She was calm poised, wearing a slate gray blazer, natural curls pulled back, and a slim gold cross necklace that caught the light every time she shifted. She'd been invited to discuss education reform, but if anyone in the building thought they'd be sticking to the agreed talking points, they hadn't worked with Ward before. Congresswoman Crockett, he said, leaning in just slightly before we talk policy, I just gotta ask, that necklace, is that for the cameras, or do you actually believe what that stands for? It took less than 3 seconds. 3 seconds for the crew to stiffen. 3 seconds for the director in the control room to whisper, Are you kidding me? 3 seconds for Jasmine to blink once, lips tightening. Just barely. People watching at home saw it live, no delay. No edit, just a smug question tossed out like a lit match, and everyone waiting to see if she'd burn it all down. She could have snapped. People expected that, a few even hoped for it, but Jasmine didn't move fast. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink twice. She just said, Is that really how we're starting the air in the room? Shifted, the kind of shift where silence feels louder than noise. Clayton smirked as if brushing it off. It's just a question. You wear it so often, I figured it was messaging. Jasmine's voice came back like glass clear, smooth. Not sharp, but it cut anyway. You see a cross and assume performance. I see it, and I think about how I held it in my palm at my grandmother's funeral. I think about the nights I sat on the floor with my shoes off and my heart broken, whispering prayers that no one else heard. So if you think that's a show, maybe you've never needed faith for a beat. No one said a thing. Clayton looked caught, not angry, just surprised, like he didn't expect to be answered like that. Not with scripture, not with fury, just with something he didn't recognize. Quiet truth, the camera operator said later. He nearly forgot to move the shot. She looked right into the lens, he told a friend that evening. Like she was talking to people in their living rooms. She didn't stop there. People like to treat symbols like ornaments. She continued, until it's theirs, then it's sacred. That necklace, it's not for you. It's not even for them. She gestured toward the cameras. It's for me. It reminds me that I don't have to change for people who wouldn't last a week. Walking through what I've walked through there, it was not a clapback, not a takedown. Just the truth, and people could feel it at home. Clips were already being recorded, phones held up to TV screens, screenshots flying on Twitter. Some people didn't even know her name before that moment, but now they were searching it, tagging it, reposting it. But in the studio, it was still quiet. Even Clayton's follow-up felt shaky. Well, all right then. Jasmine gave a small shrug. You asked, but what happened after the camera stopped rolling? That's where things really started shifting. As soon as the red light on the main camera dimmed, the tension didn't, if anything, it thickened. The silence in the studio wasn't the easy kind, it was tight, heavy. Jasmine unplugged her mic with practiced ease and stood slowly smoothing her blazer as she glanced over at Clayton. He looked down, fiddling with his papers like they might save him. The producer, Rachel Garvey, stepped forward with a stiff smile. Congresswoman Crocker. Thank you again for your time, she said. Voice clipped and eyes darting between Jasmine and the host. Jasmine smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't ask for a response. I've got a flight in 2 hours, she said, but I'm sure y'all will talk about this long after I'm gone. In the hallway, a junior staffer named Declan caught up to her early 20s, red tie. A little too long, nervous energy in every step, ma'am. He said, voice low, that was something else. Jasmine turned, slightly waiting. My grandma always wore a cross too. That part where you talked about praying on the floor. He swallowed, felt real because it is, she said gently. Then she kept walking. Meanwhile, inside the control room, phones started buzzing. One of the assistant directors shouted from behind the glass. People are already posting clips, Twitter's lighting up, TikTok too. Rachel leaned over Clayton's shoulder, whispering sharply, next time stick to policy, she just baptized you on your own show. Clayton didn't answer. He stared at the monitor showing Jasmine walking out of the building, then mumbled, didn't think she'd take it personal, but it wasn't personal. That was the part that caught everyone off guard. Jasmine didn't lash out because of a petty insult. Her words hit hard, because they spoke to something deeper. Something millions of people carried with them, but didn't always talk about: faith. Pain, endurance. She didn't make it about herself. She made it about everyone who'd ever had their sincerity questioned. Back in the car, Jasmine sat in the back seat of the black SUV, windows, tinted phone buzzing nonstop in her purse. Her aide, Tamika Preston, glanced at the screen and let out a low whistle. Jazz. CNN clipped it. It's already got 80,000 views. Jasmine leaned her head back and closed her eyes. They'll twist it by tonight, some might. Tamika admitted, but not all. You didn't give them heat. You gave them light. Jasmine opened one eye. You rehearsing speeches in the mirror again. Tamika smiled maybe, but I'm not wrong. By early afternoon, the clip was everywhere. Conservative blogs called it dramatic and calculated, but comments on the videos told another story. People wrote about being judged at work for wearing a cross, about hiding their beliefs to avoid being labeled. One comment stood out. I'm not even religious, but what she said hit me, that kind of dignity that's rare. Another said that necklace wasn't the story, but her response that's going to live, rent-free in my mind. But the real shock came hours later when someone from the host's own network leaked an internal email, and that changed everything. At 6:47 p.m., an anonymous Twitter account with a handle that barely made sense. I in the Room posted 4 screenshots. The images showed the header of an internal email thread from Ward's network. Timestamped just 1 hour after the broadcast. The subject line, Crockett Incident. Urgent messaging guidance beneath it. A string of messages between executives, PR reps, and Clayton himself. Nothing was redacted. Nothing was spared. It wasn't just a PR scramble. It was a panic spiral. The first email came from Julia Debray, the network's head of communications. We need to get ahead of this, frame the comment as observational. Not derogatory, suggest he was referring to the politicization of faith symbols in public service. Not her personally, then one from Clayton wasn't my best moment, but she made me look like I kicked a puppy. We need to shift focus. She's turning this into a sermon. Another exec replied bluntly. We underestimated her bad optics. It took less than 5 minutes for the screenshots to explode. People didn't just react to the content, they dissected every sentence. The idea that Clayton had admitted fault in private while staying smug in public made things worse. And the part about shifting focus that lit the match in Sacramento, a young theology professor posted a 3-minute video breaking it down. The problem here isn't just that he mocked her, it's that when confronted with authenticity, he panicked, and the institution tried to spin it. That's not journalism, that's damage control. By 9:15 p.m., hashtag Crockett Cross was trending nationwide. Meanwhile, Jasmine was on a flight headed to Phoenix for a community event. She hadn't even seen the leak yet. Tamika was scrolling next to her, shaking her head as tweets poured in like water through a busted pipe. Look at this one, she said. Turning her screen, a pastor in Tallahassee just said, Your words got quoted in a sermon tonight. Jasmine smiled faintly, then closed her eyes again. I didn't say anything special, just told the truth. Sometimes, Tamika said, that's the loudest thing you can do. Elsewhere, the fallout deepened that night. Clayton tried to get ahead of it. He went live on his personal YouTube channel from what looked like his kitchen camera angle. Awkward lighting, uneven. I've received a lot of messages today. He began, some supportive, some critical. I want to clarify something. My question to Replug Crockett was never meant as an attack on her faith. He paused, glanced down. I just think when politicians use symbols, we should be able to ask why the comments did not go well. "You weren't asking, you were mocking," someone typed. She answered, "Better than you deserved." Imagine being threatened by a necklace. Clayton ended the stream after 11 minutes. Meanwhile, inside her hotel room in Phoenix, Jasmine finally read the leaked emails. Her face didn't change. She didn't gasp or curse, she just sat still, the phone lighting up in her hand. Then she opened the Notes app and started typing. The next morning, she posted a single tweet. "If your instinct is to spin the truth, maybe you weren't standing on solid ground to begin with." 22 words, that was it. And yet by lunchtime, that sentence was printed on posters at Howard University. Someone stenciled it onto a wall outside a church in Fresno. Teachers read it aloud in classrooms. A rapper in Detroit wove it into a freestyle during a live Instagram set. But not everyone was celebrating. Some people wanted her silenced, and they were already planning how to do it 2 days later. Inside a beige conference room in Washington, D.C., a private meeting was held on the 7th floor of the Capitol Hill complex, the kind with no press, no phones, and no recordings. Just doors shut tight and people speaking low, but carrying big agendas. 5 party operatives, 2 senior aides from rival offices, and 1 high-level donor advisor sat around a glass table on the screen at the end of the room. A paused frame of Jasmine Crockett's now viral TV moment. Her cross necklace catching the light as she looked straight into the lens. She's turning into a symbol. One of the aides said, "Arms crossed, a martyr." "We didn't ask for." No, corrected another. "She's turning into a narrative. We don't control there." It was the real problem, not her beliefs. Not her tone control. A woman named Laurel Kinsey, an old-school strategist known for her steel glare, and zero patience, stood up. We've seen this before. Someone gets a microphone, then a movement starts. If she gets too loud, she becomes the message, not the issues. "So what do we do?" asked one of the younger aides. Laurel narrowed her eyes. "You pressure, you isolate quietly." Make her an island calls were made that afternoon. Invitations rescinded. Scheduled appearances with certain bipartisan groups suddenly evaporated. One think tank quietly canceled a panel she'd been booked for. A senator who had praised her in private didn't return her team's calls. The temperature shifted not publicly, but in ways that were hard to ignore. Back in her D.C. office, Jasmine sat with Tamika reviewing the week ahead. When the phone rang, it was Alethea Morin, an old friend, and former law professor turned ethics chair at a liberal watchdog group. Althea said without preamble, "They're circling. I've already heard 2 separate donor boards whispering about whether you're becoming divisive." Jasmine let out a quiet sigh for wearing a necklace, no, for refusing to apologize for wearing it. She didn't respond right away outside the window. The street buzzed with pedestrians in winter coats, unaware of the slow burn happening inside this office. But Jasmine knew the game. She'd seen it play out on others, a slow drip of silence, then absence, then replacement. So Jasmine finally said, "What would you do?" There was a pause on the line, then Althea answered, "I'd hold the mic tighter the next morning." Jasmine stood behind a wooden podium at a town hall meeting in Flagstaff, Arizona. The room was packed with voters, folding chairs, standing room in the back. People pressed against the walls. It wasn't supposed to be a major stop, just a scheduled check-in with local organizers, but something had changed. Her story had followed her, and the people showed up for more. She didn't start with policy. She didn't need to last week. She began, "Someone asked me if my necklace was a show. I told them it wasn't. I told them about my grandmother, about the nights I prayed alone. But what I didn't say is this." She gripped the sides of the podium and leaned forward just a bit. "Faith is only performative if you're pretending I'm not pretending. And I'm not backing up just because someone else got uncomfortable with what keeps me grounded." There was no applause, not at first, just nods, deep ones, the kind people give when they're not clapping. Because they're remembering something of their own. Then someone in the back stood up and said, "Say that again." She did after the event. A woman in her 60s came up to her, eyes wet. "My husband made me hide my cross for years," she said. "You made me take it out of the drawer." Jasmine didn't cry, but she held that woman's hand for a long time. But while the people were listening, the networks were plotting something bigger, because A live mic moment wasn't supposed to create a movement. That Friday, just before noon, something shifted in the media tone, subtle at first. Headlines didn't mention the necklace anymore. Instead, they brought up old comments Jasmine had made during her early campaign days, clipped out of context, framed with just enough doubt to muddy the waters. One read Crockett once questioned law enforcement's bias, too radical for Congress. Another, can a politician with strong personal beliefs lead objectively? The language was calculated, not accusing, but planting seeds, casting shadows that didn't need to be real. They just needed to grow by 3 p.m. Her Wikipedia page had been edited 3 times. One edit inserted false details about her former legal clients. Another twisted a local policy she'd opposed into a rumor about her being anti-family. They're doing it. Tamika said, pacing in Jasmine's office, the smear machine is on. Jasmine remained at her desk, her phone sitting screen up, unread messages stacking in her inbox. They want people to stop hearing the truth and start second-guessing the messenger. That's exactly what they want. Tamika replied, voice sharp outside their window. Fog rolled in over the Capitol, the kind of gray that made everything look a little less defined inside. Though Jasmine's thoughts were sharper than ever that night. The worst part, landed a popular primetime show on a competing conservative network, aired a full segment on Jasmine titled The Rise of the Preacher Politician. For 15 minutes, the host went over her past cases, her church affiliations, and framed her cross as part of a branding strategy. They brought on a so-called body language expert to dissect her posture during the original interview, suggesting her calm demeanor was scripted and rehearsed. People were eating it up. The video racked up over 1.2 million views in the first 6 hours. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She waited, then just after midnight she posted a video to her Instagram. No filter, no makeup, hair wrapped. Wearing an oversized t-shirt sitting on her couch. Let's talk. She said simply. It was 6 minutes long, just her. A couch and words that didn't wobble. I'm not shocked by the smear campaign. I knew it would come. But let me be clear. I don't regret anything I said, because what I said came from truth, and truth don't need to shout it. Just needs to stand. She leaned forward. I've never hidden who I am. Not in the courtroom. Not in Congress. Not in church. And I won't start now. Just because some people get nervous when a black woman speaks with conviction. The comment section flooded instantly support pushback questions, but the overwhelming tone was one of resolve. People had seen the storm hit and watched her stand in the middle of it without flinching. In Indianapolis, a retired teacher named Selma Beck called her daughter in tears. I don't know her, she said, but I feel like she's standing for all of us in Tulsa. A 14-year-old named Brandon wrote a message to Jasmine's office printed in block letters. Your necklace is not a threat. Your truth is not a threat. Please don't stop. And in Phoenix, Tamika read that note aloud the next morning. While Jasmine packed for her next flight, she folded the letter carefully and slipped it into Jasmine's travel binder. Where to next? Jasmine asked Cincinnati. Tamika replied, Community Roundtable already sold out. Local church had to open up overflow space. Jasmine smiled, not wide but real. But while her support was growing at the ground level, someone upstairs was preparing to take a different shot. A legal one with just enough teeth to draw blood. The envelope arrived on a Monday morning, hand delivered to her office, thick paper. No return address. Tamika found it on the desk when she got in and her stomach turned. The second she saw the seal, House Committee on Ethics, Jasmine walked in. Minutes later, holding her coffee, Tamika didn't speak. She just pointed. Jasmine picked it up, slid her thumb under the flap, and pulled out 3 pages. She read them in silence. An official complaint had been filed against her allegations. Inappropriate use of personal religious symbols in federal spaces, violation of the Establishment Clause, and leveraging personal faith to influence public discourse in a government setting. It was technical cold. Every sentence weighed down with vague legal language, but the goal was simple paint. Her as someone who crossed a constitutional line, Tamika finally broke the silence. This is manufactured. Jasmine handed her the papers. Of course it is. They both knew how it worked. Anyone could file a complaint, but when it came from inside, it carried weight. Someone wanted a formal process to begin an investigation. Headlines with the word ethics next to her name. Guilt didn't matter. The process was the punishment. The news leaked within hours that evening. The story broke on 3 different outlets. They didn't need evidence. They had the headline, Crockett under ethics scrutiny for cross necklace incident. Not alleged, not under review. Just the bold suggestion that her faith had crossed a line. In the weeks following, things turned colder. A few longtime allies went quiet. Invitations dried up again. Every appearance Jasmine made was under a microscope. Pundits debated whether her calm demeanor was defiance or delusion. But Jasmine never changed her routine. She went to work. She showed up at hearings. She held the mic 2 weeks later. She was invited to speak at a university event in Charleston, West Virginia. She almost didn't go, but something in her gut told her it wasn't just about her anymore. The auditorium wasn't huge, but it was full: students, faculty, local residents, and right there in the front row, a girl no older than 10 with cornrows and a tiny silver cross around her neck. Jasmine noticed her immediately. She spoke without notes that night. They filed an ethics complaint because I wore something that means something to me. She said voice even, but they didn't ask if I'd ever used my faith to deny someone their rights. They didn't ask if I'd ever weaponized it to silence someone else, because they know I haven't. She looked at the girl in the front row. What I wear doesn't threaten the Constitution. It threatens the illusion that you can box people in, strip them of their layers, and still call it fairness. The room was quiet, not because people weren't engaged, but because they were listening afterward. The little girl walked up to her, tugged on Jasmine's sleeve, and said, "I wear mine because it makes me feel brave." Jasmine knelt to meet her eyes. Me too. Back in D.C., the complaint was quietly dismissed 10 days later. No press conference, no apology, just a footnote buried under other announcements, but the damage was already done, or so they thought, because what happened next wasn't orchestrated by a committee or funded by a PAC. It was something far more unpredictable, but just when it seemed like the fire might die down, something unexpected reignited it, and this time it came from the very person who started it all. It happened on a Thursday out of nowhere. Clayton Ward went live on his podcast. Ward unfiltered a show that normally ran once a week and rarely made headlines. But this episode was different. No guests, no music intro, just Clayton seated in what looked like a basement studio, a plain wall behind him, and a single microphone in front. His face looked older, tired even. "I've been thinking about that interview for weeks," he said. Eyes locked on the camera, and I've been thinking about what it did to people. And to me, his voice didn't carry its usual bite. No sarcasm, no posturing, just something quieter. Regret. Maybe I asked a question I thought was clever, sharp. I thought I was going to pin her down. Make her uncomfortable, I thought. If I'm being honest, I'd expose something fake. He took a breath, but she was the realest person in that room. People began screen recording the moment before the live even ended. Clayton leaned back in his chair. We throw around words like values and integrity, but when someone like Jasmine Crockett shows up wearing hers in plain sight, we get nervous, or worse, we get petty. The comment section exploded. Is this real? I never thought I'd hear this from him too late. Respect for owning it. He didn't apologize in the traditional sense. No dramatic gestures, no PR scripted language, but he admitted what no one expected. She made me look at myself, and I didn't like what I saw. That sentence was clipped and reposted within minutes. By noon, the story hit every platform. Clayton Ward acknowledges mistake in Crockett. Interview: CNN, Fox, MSNBC. Everyone wanted a piece of the pivot. Some were skeptical, of course. Many accused him of trying to rehab his image, soften his brand, but others said it meant something. Because most people don't change course midstream. Most keep swimming in the wrong direction. Because turning around takes something. Few people want to risk humility. Jasmine didn't comment right away. She was in Kansas City that day, meeting with a group of youth organizers at a community center. She hadn't even seen the clip until someone pulled it up on their phone and held it out to her between meetings. She watched the video in silence, then she handed the phone back and said, If that's real, it's a start later that night. She finally tweeted, "Truth makes people uncomfortable. Growth starts there." It wasn't a mic drop. It was an open door. And for a brief moment, something shifted again. People who hadn't agreed with her politics started reposting her response. Not because they suddenly changed parties, but because they respected the way she carried herself through chaos. A popular morning radio host in Cleveland said it best the next day. She didn't match fire with fire, she let it burn itself out. That's rare at a diner in Amarillo, Texas. An older man who had voted Republican for 40 years told the waitress refilling his coffee. I didn't like what he said to her, but I respect how she answered. That's what you teach your kids. Respect doesn't always come from agreement. Sometimes it comes from seeing someone hold steady when everything around them tries to push them off balance. But just as things were cooling down and the nation started breathing again, a viral moment from Jasmine's past came to light, one that forced the country to look even deeper on a quiet Sunday evening. A grainy video surfaced online. Just 30 seconds long, it showed a younger Jasmine Crockett, maybe 21, maybe 22, speaking passionately in a student forum at Prairie View, A&M University. She stood at the front of a crowded classroom, voice trembling, but firm. The quality of the video wasn't great, but the sound was clear. "I'm tired of being told my faith has to stay hidden, that if I bring it into public spaces, it makes people uncomfortable, but they're not the ones praying through eviction notices. They're not the ones asking God for one more breath before stepping into rooms where they're not." "Welcome," someone off camera asked a question. Jasmine paused, then added, "I don't need permission to carry what kept me alive." The video had only 187 views when it was first posted, probably uploaded by an old classmate cleaning out a hard drive, but it took off fast, really fast. By Monday morning, it had hit 1 million. The reaction was instant and more complex than before. Some praised her consistency, how her tone hadn't changed in all those years, how her quiet strength had been there all along. Others, though, tried to weaponize it. They accused her of building a brand from personal struggle. They questioned whether someone who spoke so freely about faith in college could ever be neutral in public office. Cable news ran the clip on a loop. One panel argued she had a God complex. Another praised her courage back at her office. Jasmine sat with her laptop open, watching the same 30 seconds play again and again. She didn't remember the exact moment the video had been taken, but she remembered the feeling in her chest, how her heart pounded, how her voice felt too small for what she needed to say. Tamika walked in, holding a printed copy of a new op-ed. "You're in the Atlantic. They're calling it the Crockett Doctrine." Jasmine looked up. "What does that even mean?" Tamika shrugged. That public faith doesn't have to mean exclusion, that authenticity in politics is disruptive, that maybe truth still matters. Jasmine closed her laptop. "I didn't ask for doctrine, I just didn't want to be silenced." "Well, too late," Tamika said. "Now you're a symbol the next day." Jasmine returned to the House floor for a scheduled vote. As she passed through the hall, she noticed something strange: colleagues she barely spoke to. Nodding in acknowledgement, one even whispering, "Stay strong," another staffer. A Republican aide slipped her a folded note as she walked by. She opened it later. It read, "We don't agree on much, but you showed my daughter what grace looks like that same evening." The original student who filmed the college video was interviewed by a local news station in Waco. "I just posted it because it reminded me of how hard she fought to be heard. Back then, she said she didn't change the world." Finally caught up, Jasmine wasn't looking to go viral again. She wasn't chasing headlines or waiting for applause, but what she had done across years, across states, across that one quiet moment on live television, was tell the truth, and somehow that had stuck with people. Not because it was loud, but because it was real, but just when it seemed like the story had found its heartbeat. Something happened in Texas that shook the ground beneath it, and once again Jasmine was pulled into the center of a conversation she hadn't asked for in Beaumont, Texas. A sleepy Gulf Coast city where church attendance was still higher than the national average. A local school board meeting turned into a national headline. A proposed policy, one that would have restricted students and teachers from wearing visible religious symbols, including crosses, hijabs, and yarmulkes, was on the table. The official language claimed the intent was to maintain neutrality in educational spaces. But the subtext was loud. Parents packed the room. Local reporters filed in the board chair, tried to keep order, but emotions were already boiling. One woman stood up, cross-pendant visible over her blouse, and spoke with her voice shaking. "You're not protecting neutrality. You're telling our children that what gives them peace has to be hidden. That's not neutrality, that's shame." Then a teenage boy stood and said, "If I take off my kippah, I am not neutral. I'm invisible." The clip hit social media that night by sunrise. Someone had spliced it with Jasmine Crockett's original interview. Her words, "It's not a prop. It's a reminder," ran in a loop over footage of students testifying at the podium. Tears on their cheeks, voices cracking. Jasmine didn't ask to be connected to the story, but by noon she was news anchors invoked her name. This echoes the Crockett controversy. The Beaumont policy stirs up the same questions about personal faith in public spaces. She wasn't even in Texas at the time. She was in Detroit meeting with housing advocates. But her phone buzzed nonstop. Tamika slid her a phone showing a tweet from a parent in Beaumont. It read, "My daughter asked if she had to take her necklace off to be a good student. I told her about Jasmine Crockett." Jasmine just shook her head. "They're using the same playbook," she muttered. "Frame it like order, then chip away at identity by afternoon." She was asked to comment. Every network wanted a quote. Some even offered to fly her to Beaumont for a statement. She declined instead. She recorded a short message from her hotel room. She didn't name names. She didn't attack the school board. She just said, "When you tell a child to hide what centers them, you don't make them feel safer. You make them question who they are. Public spaces aren't sterile. They're human. We bring our stories, our pain, our beliefs. That's not the problem. That's the point." The video gained traction quickly, not because it was viral ready, but because it felt like it belonged to everyone. Teachers started playing it in classrooms. Parents shared it in group chats. Pastors referenced it in Sunday sermons. Even a few lawmakers from both parties reposted it with a simple word: respect, but not. Everyone was clapping. The next morning, a conservative columnist wrote a scathing piece titled "Jasmine Crockett and the Myth of Public Neutrality." He claimed her message blurred the lines between church and state and accused her of emotional manipulation through selective storytelling. That same day, a political action committee started running Facebook ads targeting her district, claiming she wanted religion in every classroom and federal overreach through personal testimony. The quotes were cherry-picked. Some were flat-out fabricated. Tamika stared at the ads and muttered, "They're scared." Jasmine didn't respond right away. Instead, she attended a small town hall in rural Ohio, where the chairs squeaked and the coffee came from a metal urn in the corner. A grandmother approached her afterward, clutching a purse with a worn-out Bible sticking out. "I don't care what they say about you," she whispered. "You gave us permission to be seen again that night." Jasmine finally posted one line to her socials. "Neutrality isn't silence, it's fairness, and fairness doesn't ask us to erase ourselves." But what happened next wasn't about politics anymore. It was about something far more personal. And it came from someone Jasmine thought she'd never hear from again.